Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for this Apps for Greentree webinar. I hope that everyone is doing well. It's certainly been an interesting time over the last month. I'm just really glad that we have entered the next level and that we are slowly making our way to normality again. Our team at Verde has been working through though, and we've been fortunate to be well adapted to remote working. So we've been supporting our customers throughout this whole time, and our development team have again put their heads together, and soon we will bring some exciting new functionality out for Greentree, but more will be released over the next few weeks. So this webinar today will be recorded and we will share it afterwards, and this webinar will focus on our freight-related applications. Just to introduce the team today, I'm joined today by Craig Anderson. Craig is a senior consultant with Verde, who I'm sure most of you already know very well. Craig has been with us since 2007 and has a really strong background in warehousing and logistics and also job costing. On a personal side, he's a keen sailor with a fondness for muscle cars. And that's me on the right. I look after marketing and sales at Verde. Now, it's been a bit interesting putting together this webinar with trying to play homeschooling teacher and all of that. So some parts of our webinar is pre-recorded and some parts are live. So please just bear with us as we move through. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box in your dashboard and our team will answer them as we go through. But we will also have a live question and answer session at the end with Craig. Now, I'm sure most of you already are aware of the Apps for Greentree framework, but for anyone that is new to Greentree or new to Verde, an app is a piece of add-on functionality that works seamlessly with Greentree. They sit within your Greentree system, and at the moment we have over 130 apps available on our appsforgreentree.com site. Now, apps can vary from small customizations to actually complete modules, and we often do also develop custom applications for our customers, which can then be made available on our store for other customers to use. So if you do have an idea on add-on functionality that will make your life a bit easier with Greentree, please let us know and we'll give you an update on how that process works. Apps are subscription-based and they are renewed annually. And you can view a full list of all the apps that are available on the Apps for Greentree website. They usually range from as little as $100 a year to maybe up to $1,500 a year for the more complex applications. Now, we do also have our premium pack available. This is a pack that consists of over 60 different applications that's been developed, and that sells for $2,500 a year. It's a really good value to get all that add-on functionality in your system. And if you are keen on this, a full list of all the applications that are included in this pack is also available on the website. And our team will also gladly assist if you would like us to have a review of your current apps and see if it would be more feasible for you to move over to a premium pack. Now, I'm going to hand over to Craig now to take us through some of the fun stuff.
Hi and welcome to this Apps for Greentree webinar, which is going to cover 3 apps that are relevant to the sales order and the warehouse dispatch process. I'll run through the features of each of the apps and then give a short demonstration on how they work. Once I'm done with that, we'll come back around and have a look at some of the setup options that will give you the flexibility to control how users are able to interact with the apps. The 3 apps that I'll be using today are focused on controlling the delivery of items and the freight costs to the business. As I'm sure you're well aware, freight can be a very large cost to any distribution business, and it's probably never more relevant than at the current time when couriers are seeing record levels of parcels being shipped, that businesses look to control this cost and ensure that both customers get the right products delivered first time and that the freight is being charged appropriately based on your rules, or not charged if that's applicable. So the 3 apps we're going to have a look at today are the Advanced SO Carrier app. What this does is this allows you to select the carrier that will actually take these products to the customer when entering the sales order. That flows through to the packing slip and the labels that are then printed from the packing slip, and will mean that you don't have to re-enter that detail. The second app that we're going to have a look at is the dispatch scanning and delivery labels. So this allows you to control what stock's going out by either forcing people to use a scanner to scan the barcode and confirm that it's the right product, or they can key in the code of the product they've grabbed and they can then add the products in to ensure that the correct products are packaged. It also allows for the printing of delivery labels, which can be scanned, giving a record of what was dispatched in each box and controlling how many cartons or boxes need to be used to get those products to the customer. And the last app, and the biggest of the apps, is the Advanced Freight app. This allows you to configure complex rules for freight charging that are automatically applied, so that when your packing slip is created, the warehouse staff don't need to think about the freight that should be charged on the invoice. It'll come based on those rules, and those rules can have complexities built in, from like exclude this product, or only on the first print of a packing, or only on a first packing slip from a sales order, or when a sales order is under this value. There is built-in reports to help you analyze your freight costs and to understand where you are charging and not charging freight. So it also deals with freight-free customers, but there is still a cost to you for that. So the freight-free analysis lets you look at that and decide if it's worthwhile. It allows for delivery manifest automation so that you can print the delivery labels and complete things on a scheduled delivery pickup. You can also use the app to add freight onto location transfers. So when you have to move product internally branch to branch, if there is still a freight cost, you can have that included in that location transfer so that you can change the cost of the actual products in the new location, or on job invoicing. So it is possible to do a job invoice and have freight added onto that as well. There is also the option to report on who actually picks and packs orders, and there is KPI reporting on that, so you can look at the level of returns, etc., based on people. And also there is the option of creating integration with things like New Zealand Couriers or the IT dispatch systems, so that you can generate and send to them automatically the files that they need. So those are 3 apps that we're going to have a look at. We'll go through, do a quick demonstration now, and then come back around and show you some of those setup options that are possible. So I'm in one of our demonstration systems here. We've got a couple of screens to have a look at. We're going to look at the job cost AR invoice screen. We'll have a look at the location transfer screen and what has changed on those 2 screens for you. And then we'll go and have a look at the sales order packing slip process. But where I'm starting with this is in the customer maintenance. So part of having the freight app means that in a customer screen, you now have a tab for freight, where you can determine what their default freight type is, which will control all of the rules around that. You can change the invoice email template that goes out when they receive invoices directly from the freighter. You can decide if on this customer you want to let the warehouse staff change the override or the defaults and have an override on it. If I tick that, I will get certain options around what do I want to allow them to change, or what do I want their defaults to be. Leave that off. So in the JC AR invoice form, what we have is a new button. We've at this point completed normally how we would raise a job invoice. We have chosen our sales lines. We have this additional button here called the complete button. So when I click on the complete button, I get my freight screen. And this is allowing me to go, what was the ticket number that we are sending this on for tracking purposes? It was 2 boxes, total of 0.2, and we'll say 20 kilos. So I can load all this information in so that we're able to see it going into the future. I can then also come across to the right and I can see that it is charge freight. So we are going to charge them freight on this order based on our rules that say this is how much, and so we should be charging them freight. And I get a list of the relevant freight stock items that I could be charging if I want to. And over here, I'm able to go along, look at the one that I want, and then select it. Once I've made my choice of what the freight is going to be and the quantity of that freight that we are charging, I can simply click on OK, and I'll be taken back to the job cost hour invoice entry screen. At this point, what you'll see is that a line of freight has been added on at the appropriate rate for this customer. Now that's been done based on the activity code that was assigned to the freight inventory item. In the background, there is going to be an automatic transfer onto the job of one of those inventory items with a cost attached to it, so that the job will show a cost transaction. It will be automatically marked as invoiced, and obviously on this invoice there will be revenue attached to it of $25 against the freight sales code, and that will all be reflected on the job automatically. Users don't need to do anything. All we need to do now is save and exit the invoice, and that was a job cost AR invoice being done with freight included on it. So the other item that we were going to have a quick look at was what happens when you do an inventory transfer. So you need to move product from one location to the next. This is the normal inventory location transfer screen. What you'll see additional is it now actually allows you to pick the freight code, select the quantity of freight that you need, and when I save this item, not only will the transfer happen to move product from the location, but a second transaction will be made up to record the freight cost that's going to be added on because of this inventory transaction happening. Now, when you actually look, this has a reference, and to identify the freight code for the sale, or the freight reference for the same transaction, it will be the same reference with an F added onto the end of it. So what I can do with this one, I can grab that, have a look. There is my one with an F. It used that freight code because it was the one that I selected. It recorded the location, the quantity, and of course the cost has come from the cost on there. So if you are doing something like using courier bags and you're buying certain items, then this will actually keep track of and make sure that your count is accurate for when you need to check that you've got the right number of bags left if you're doing a stock take. So that's the end of these screens, and we'll move on. So I've now opened my sales order entry screen, and this is where the three apps, you start to see the changes on the data entry screens that the users would see. First things first, I see a freight type. Now it's defaulted to standard freight, which has come from the customer. Based on my user settings, we'll be determining whether I can change that at this point to one of my other freight types if I wanted to record something for this customer as a special order with special freight terms. I'm also seeing which carrier I want to send these goods on, so I can specify at this point that I want it to go by New Zealand Courier. Also, within this custom tab, I can mark something as urgent, or I can set up any number of customer or sales order UDFs that I want to track how this freight needs to work. Now, what I've done just to show you the differences, I've set up two orders for the same customer. This one's for quite a high value, and I have set up another one which is for a much lower value, same customer, same freight type, same carrier type, same ticks on the custom tab, just so we can show you how the single freight type rule is going to determine different freight values to be charged to this customer. Now, I'm just going to packing slip that order, and I will packing slip that order so that I can now go and demonstrate the packing slip process that happens now. So here I am in my packing slip. First thing you'll notice, it's read-only. It says it's read-only because it must be checked. So this is the dispatch app coming into play. The dispatch app I've set up to say that every item must be checked, and so I get this checkbox here where when I click on it, I will get a list of the items that are on this packing slip that need to be checked. I get this code field where I can either scan the item and it will include it, or I can key in the item code and it will add it. And I also get this print labels box. So you have the option of saying either print labels at the end once you've created them all, print labels now, or you can have labels printed at the very end of the complete process, which will happen after this. So for now, I'm going to go through and say one of those going in the box. And you'll see as soon as I put it in there, it said this item is now in the first carton. If I expand that out, I will see all of the items that go into the same carton. If I have multiple items, I can keep adding them. And if I need to, if my carton gets full and I need to create a new one, I can obviously click on new carton to have a new carton created. When all of my items are moved, I will get the OK button. Prior to that, I could be halfway through this and I could hold it so that I don't lose the work that I'm doing, and I could come back to it if I need to. Now, as soon as I checked those items and I now come back here, I'm now in the complete form, which is going to allow me to go through this next stage of the process. And when I click on it, I'm seeing now my customer, my packing slip details, the fact that this customer is set up to print the invoice as soon as it happens, or email the invoice to that person as soon as it happens. I might decide to take those off because I don't need that process to happen, and I will just finalize the packing slip. Those are all controlled by user rights. I can also set this up so that I have to have someone pick it. Someone's going to check what they picked. Someone's then going to pack it, and someone's going to check what went into the box. Now, each of these fields can be password protected so that when I actually choose them, the person would actually have to put in their Greentree password to confirm that it was them that did that action. So therefore, we can track what's happening. You will see that from New Zealand carriers, which is what I chose on my sales order, it has automatically come across onto this screen. It tells me the total number of boxes. I can choose to print delivery labels at this point as well if I want to. And because I'm logged in as Super, I do get this test print label so you can actually see what the labels would look like on this one, which is useful when you're doing the setup and initial setup of the label prints. I can choose what freight stock code I want to do, which will set my cost of freight. And if I go OK, it's trying to confirm my consignment notes. We'll just get rid of them and we'll come back to our packing slip. And what we will see now is our packing slip shows the information about how this was sent. It also has added a line of freight on with a cost. Because we're charging it to the customer, it has put $6.61 to be sent to them. If I had forgotten to print my delivery labels but I needed them, I can see my print delivery labels option here, and also onto here will have been put my courier information details. So this packing slip's now ready to go, and all of the freight has been added on, and when it is invoiced, that freight will be automatically charged to the customer. So here I am with my second packing slip. Same concept, got a couple of items on this one, but I have to go through my checkbox to actually decide what items are on here. Now on this one, once again, I could scan them if it was set up to scan only, or I can either scan or key them in. Now on this one, you'll notice I have two items here, and automatically it's put it into two cartons. So we'll have a look at that in a minute, because that's all around the setup of that item that says that each one of them goes in its own carton. In the meantime, I'm adding on the next one. The next one can't go with one of the other two because it says they're in their separate cartons, so it creates its own carton. Now, where there were volumes and weights on these coming from the inventory items, it has also automatically filled that out for me. If I haven't put them in, I am able to go and add in the values that I need, that the courier companies might need or the carrier might need to get there. Now, once I've got all of them, of course, I can now go, okay. My packing slip now has the option of getting to the complete form. So much like the last one, I'm going to select who picked, checked, packed, and confirmed it. 3 packages, it's going on there based on my sales order. I'm going to say that that is the freight carrier that I need to put it through. And then I can click on OK and be taken back to my packing slip screen. Now what you'll see when we come back to the packing slip on this one is that I left the invoice tick on, so it's automatically been invoiced as soon as I clicked on the complete button. And also it added this line of freight, but my rule says that because this was over a certain dollar value, we're not charging it to the customer. So the customer will still see that freight occurred, but that they got that freight for free. And these details have been passed across to the invoice. So that's what the user experience in terms of screens looks like. What we'll do next is we'll go in and just have a look at a couple of the reports and also what setup options and how the setup affects how this works. So we'll go on to that now. So now that we've seen how the user's experience works with these apps, it's time now to have a look at reporting off them and also some of the setup and apps controls that you have when installing these apps. So first of all, if I look at the reporting of freight, so we can have a look at what we have charged and what we haven't charged. If we go reports, other reports, we have the ability in here to look for a report called the IN Freight Analysis Report. This report's going to let me have a look at both who we've charged freight to and where we've lost revenue from freight. So where freight has not been charged at the rates that we expect to for that customer. So if I print this, I can analyze it by a date range. I'm going to put in a rather large date range just because I don't have many transactions in the system now. I can, first of all, by not looking at it in summary, I can have a look at this and see which freight codes did we charge on which invoice numbers and what was the lost value. So where the freight was charged at a lower value, I will see that through to giving me a total freight that we've lost across here. So this is showing me who the customers are, what the freight types are being used and where they've been assigned. If I want to summarize that, then I can come in here, click on summary only, preview the same thing, and I'm seeing my inventory transactions that are showing me freight. And obviously those totals add up and the quantity of each type of freight that has been used. So that lets me come back and analyze how is the business dealing with freight, where are we giving it away that we maybe don't want to be, and then modify my rules from that or control who is able to make those decisions around giving away cheaper freight, which we will look at a little bit later in this video. So I'm just going to close that down and come back to my main screen. So the next one for us to have a look at is around the carrier maintenance that we looked at and the ability to load it onto a sales order. So under System Sales Orders, I get a new option here, which is my carrier maintenance screen. In here, I can set up a new one by filling in all of these fields. If I skip to having a look at some of the ones I've already got set up, it's telling me what my code, name, address, country details are. So contacts at the carrier, so my contacts at New Zealand Courier, whether this courier requires or carrier requires a consignment note, and then the packing slip confirmation, what should happen? Should we generate a file? Should we print the label? If we do, what barcode printer do we use? We'll deal with that in a little bit. And if there is a service code for them, which is quite common with carriers. So this list is going to control what the users are able to actually choose from the drop-down window in the sales order entry screen that we saw earlier. So once I have my carriers entered, there are a couple of apps control settings that can be set with this. If I just skip to one that I prepared earlier, this is the app control for the advanced SO carrier. When I click in here, my settings that I have the choice of here are, let's make it mandatory to enter the carrier on the sales order header. And if my carrier can accept or return files, so if I can electronically send a CSV file or some other sort of file to the carrier, and that can alert them to what is there to be picked up, or they will send back confirmations, then I can also load an import and export directory for the files to be sent to, which will automatically happen on packing slip confirmation, and they will then be picked up and moved on. So that's all I need to do in my current sales order carrier control. If I flick to my freight app control, which has a lot more settings in it, we're going to come back and look at a number of these shortly. But what I can see in here is there is a tick box for display courier information, and that can be set to display courier information. And if there's not something from the SO carrier app, I can then have it set here so that it can default to be whatever the company's preferred supplier or preferred carrier is when processing freight. What we also see in here are some printer settings. So this is where the dispatch, scan, and print labels app starts to overlap with the SO carrier app, because we can also set in here default labels, and these labels would be only overridden if in the SO carrier app, SO carrier maintenance, we decided to print something else. So we have what we're going to do for printing labels here, and if we had nothing but we set it to be default, it would use the labels that are in here. Now you have choices, because if I quickly open up my barcode maintenance, you can use a green tree standard report, or you can choose to print delivery labels from here that will be written by a developer to match exactly to what your courier company's requirements are. So you'll see from here we can have codes, we can say how many labels print per label, we can choose to use a packing slip or a job dispatch label, and this is where, by saying use direct printer feed, this is actually written, and it all looks, no one can really understand it apart from the developers, but that is all written in the printer's language so that we can send something direct to printer, and that is quite common on the courier type labels with barcodes and that you see. There is also the choice of simply choosing a green tree report writer report that is written. So both the carrier app and the dispatch app do work together to work out which of these is the right labels to print when you choose the print labels option in the packing slip or at the end of the packing slip process. And it can be a direct feed type report where it's written in the printer's own language, or it can be a green tree report. That test button we saw earlier allows you to test print and look at what these will be like. One thing we'll say is that if you're using a green tree report form, you will probably have in-house knowledge of how to do that. Using a direct printer feed requires that a developer put that together for you, but your reseller is able to assist with getting that together, and often we have labels for courier companies that we've used elsewhere, and they can be copied and put in to assist with that process of getting up and running quickly. So as an example of what a report writer report might look like, you'll get something similar to this, obviously with the details of your customer, packing slip details, delivery details, whatever your carrier needs to allow them to come and pick it up. And this could include barcodes or any similar sort of information. So now let's go and have a bit more of a look at the dispatch app that we've got here. So this is the control settings we have for this. As you'll see, there's a little bit more detail in this one over the Carrier app. One of the first things is whether you use inventory auto weight or an inventory tree for cartons. Now, if you use the inventory auto weight, what you'll have is the option of adding on to your inventory item this new auto weight tab, where you can load onto here how many cartons this product comes in. So if you had a product such as a monitor where the monitor was in its own carton and the power cord and connection cables were sold in a separate carton, what you can do with this is say, this monitor, there will be 2 cartons, here's the volume and weight, and so every one of these sold must have these 2 items go with it. Auto weight allows you to load that, preload that, so it automatically comes up on the screen. If you're not using auto weight, but you're going to say use a tree for cartons, then you will specify a tree. That tree will have values which are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. On the custom tab of the item, there will be that stock cartons and there will be a value. 0 means that this product can be packaged with other products and be put into a carton. If the number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., then that is how many cartons this product requires to actually be shipped. So if it's, say, set to be 2, it would mean that this product has 2 cartons. It has the monitor and it has the carton with the cables in it, and that needs to go out together. And you would have to scan both for it to be able to be released through the check process. So that is the difference between the auto weight or the tree for cartons. We then have the force packing slip check. So the force packing slip check is going to make you run through that check process that we did. So if that is ticked on, then you cannot avoid having to actually go through the check process. With the validate weights on advanced check, that will make the system check if the items you're adding into the cartons are within a certain percentage range allowed for that package. If the require print labels is ticked on first, then what will happen is you'll actually have to load the cartons, print the labels, and then as part of the check process, you will scan the label to say this is the carton, and then scan the items to say these are the items that are going into the carton. There are the options to specify in this app also the barcode label printer and the format so that you can actually print barcode labels to go on your items. Will users be allowed to edit dispatch details after the packing slip has been completed? So we've been through this process, we've got all our details in there. Now, are we going to let people actually come in and change them after the dispatch has happened if we need to? What do customer delivery labels or packing slip delivery labels look like? And as we talked about earlier, is it a green tree report or a direct to barcode report? Can we print those barcodes from the packing slips? Do we hide the check button, which means that that button's not available and so therefore the checking process isn't required? And do we check that it's the stock items provided in full from the quantity? So a few more options on this one. It also then has options where I've said the user may be able to do that, whereby we need to have a look at the user to see what options we can set in here. So in here, I have a tab here for the dispatch app. When I click on that, I can see if I've allowed changes to happen in the module control, but I don't want to allow this user to make those changes, I can remove it for this one user. I can say that this user must scan items, they cannot key the items manually. And I can also check that this user is not forced to do the check process. So they may be able to produce a packing slip and go straight to the complete process without going through the dispatch app. So these are working in conjunction with the overall module control to set up users' individual rights within the dispatch app that we've got running here. So I'll just close a few of these things down, get back to my apps module control, and we'll go and have a look at the freight app, which has the most functional, most setup requirements and functionality built in here. So that's why I've left this one until the final app that we look at. So to get started with the freight app, what we'll do, we'll have a quick look at the user preferences that are in there. If I open up user maintenance, there are just a couple of items in here that are maintained on a freight tab. One is, do I allow this user to override the default freight type that's come from the customer? And if we're producing a file for New Zealand couriers, what directory do we let this user put it into? On the customer record, if we open this up, we do now have on the customer record a freight tab. And this is going to let us say for this customer, we're using this freight type. We can use an invoice template when we're sending out the invoices via email for this customer. What is there when we're in the packing slip complete form, do we allow this customer to override the system setup defaults, which we're going to have a look at in a minute? And do we do any of these actions when we are running this? I.e., do we print this packing slip? Do we email this invoice? Do we export the file? Do we print invoices, etc.? So these will all default onto the customer from the original module control defaults we're about to have a look at, and then these can be changed individually on a customer as they get, as you create your customers and go through and want to modify them. So if I come out of there, and I pick up my apps module control again, what we're going to have a look at now are actually all of the options that sit within this apps module control. So there are quite a few, and we'll just have a quick look at a few of them now. So what we've got on this form starting at the top over here is some defaults that will set up the basis for how the app operates unless it's overridden at a customer level or user level. So when we're doing the complete screen, does it default to printing a packing slip, emailing it, printing a consignment note? Do we finalize the packing slip automatically, or do we turn it straight into an invoice? And if we're turning it into an invoice, are we printing it? Are we emailing it? If we're sending emails, then we can put in some text here. We can decide on that packing slip form, do we actually want to see the picked by, checked by, packed by, confirmed by, and is it mandatory? Do we update the narration, and do we make the person validate it with their password? So that's where we can control that someone can't just say, oh yeah, so-and-so did it, but actually it was them. Do we display the courier information? And if so, do we have a default that would appear if there was not an ESO carrier? Default file for New Zealand courier information. And then do we display it? Do we display the date? Do we allow 0 boxes? So can you actually go complete with no cartons? Is the courier mandatory? Do we put that narration back onto the packing slip? Do we include any auto print information, weights, some information around trees that can be used for determining packaging types, update to sales information, and any additional. We've also got a couple of options to hide certain buttons, whether we auto add the freight at the packing slip or wait till we get to the sales order. Do we use freight on location transfers, and is it mandatory? Do we use freight on JCR invoices? And then some printer settings, etc. So as you can see, there's quite a bit that can be defaulted on, or quite a bit of setup. So this is this app does have a little bit more to it than a lot of them, and so it is advised you work with your partner consultants to get this information correct. Once you've got this set up, really the next large part of the setup in here is defining those rules that we talked about. And I've said that that the rules for freight can be very, very customized and very, very specific if they need to be. So on top of all of this setup, there is also freight rules set up, which I will just flick over and we'll have a look at. So we need to come out of here, and I can close this one down, and we will go to System, Sales Order, Freight Type Maintenance. So in here is actually where we are looking at what are the different freight rules that we're going to apply. So what I can do is set up as many codes as I need to manage all of our different freight types. I can also then assign each of these individually to customers so that each customer has a default freight type on there. When I process a freight transaction, I will have a default inventory transaction code, which is something you set up in the system, and also a default job cost transaction type code when I'm processing a transfer onto the job. So this is an inventory transaction code, this is a job cost transaction code, and this will work with the transaction UDF app as well to allow you to actually not only have sales orders with default things on them, but be able to mark something as, say, urgent based on a user-defined transaction field that a user can tick to say this is an order and it's urgent, and so we will actually do something different with it. So in my freight rule, basically it's hierarchical, and when these rules are applied, they are applied from the top down. So sequence 100 says charge freight if my job transaction value, I'll just make that slightly bigger so we can see the whole thing. This is a sales order line, so my order job transaction value is not important. My packing slip value is, so this says everything greater than 0 for the first packing slip only, and where the urgent is not marked. And this column lets me go, does the order have any of these items on it, in which case it's excluded. I'm going to use that transaction type by default, and I'm going to present the user with a list of these freight codes to choose from. So the freight codes will be either one that is specifically an inventory code called MF, or all codes in the inventory analysis group freight. And then I can go next one down. If exactly the same situation here, although this is on any print of a purchase order, and where it is true, what are my rules? And then if I keep working down, where the job is over 400, and then I can apply freight rules, I can get into my job cost lines and go every invoice over $1, etc. So as you can see, I can have as many of these as I need to have all my different rules set up and running within the system so that the users, as they're doing them, don't need to think about the freight that they're charging. This part of the setup is also something that we do recommend that you work with your partner consultant to actually get right. And once it's set up, run through various scenarios in a test system to make sure that you're getting the results that you expect with your freight. Now what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to close this down, get back to this screen, and I'm going to reopen in a bit more of a real world example of how this screen may look with various ones. So, we've got, when it's free in store over $1,000, you can see how now the UDFs are all working to go. If they're coming to collect it, what do we do? If it's urgent, if it's a no charge, if it's a 3-hour no charge, if it's a 1-hour urgent, if it's a 3-hour urgent. There can be various ones for different branches, etc. And all of these work in, and we can see whether we're charging freight, etc. So we can now have a number of these rules that all might work together in terms of building up how the freight's charged so the warehouse people don't need to think about how that happens. I'll just close that again, and that is the freight setup in that part. So that concludes what I wanted to show you today. We're happy to take questions shortly, and I will wrap that up by passing it back over to Juanita.